We've got a few slides here, and then we'll open the questions at the end, as mentioned, and we'll the agenda here in this first slide is we're going to talk a little bit about just an overview of the project, the history of the project, where it started, where we're heading, go over some of the existing conditions. We have the proposed layout, which most of you have viewed when you came into the room today. There are going to be some parking impacts. We'll talk a little bit about that. We have some renderings to show what the improvements might look like, and we'll talk about some other treatments and things that we might be implementing, and then we'll get into schedule and construction. One thing I just would like to point out as we go through this isn't the final plan set. We're really scratching the surface as part of this process right now, so we're really here to get some really good feedback, and the plan development's probably going to take the better part of another year and a half. So we're really at the conceptual stage now and moving to the first design level with DOT, and there's 4 stages that we need to work through with DOT. So we're really just scratching the surface. So the project limits basically, I have an image here, but it starts at High Street and works our way down to the south to the intersection at Payson Avenue. It's about 1,800 linear feet, and we're looking at doing new pavement, some wider travel lanes. The city's looking to do some water and sewer upgrades, new sidewalks throughout, concrete sidewalks. We're looking for ways to enhance the crosswalks and consolidate crosswalks. There's some on-street parking adjustments to accommodate the turn lanes, the travel lanes and the crosswalks. A new traffic signal at the signalized intersection. With any project that gets funding through the state and federal process, we have to look at providing accommodations for bicycles, pedestrians, and basically every user that would use the corridor. And then we are going to look for ways to incorporate street trees and other things like that. Even though it's a lot of urban area, we're going to look at ways to kind of integrate some of that into this project. So just a little bit on the project history. It's been around for a little bit. I wasn't involved with the beginning in 2013, but the city had the Cecil group do some planning exercises to look at the corridor and I think a few other areas in town in addition as part of that study, but they were looking at ways to enhance the rail trail with Union Street, looking at some pavement treatments, some lane configurations for bicycles, and then trying to create a little bit more of a gateway through this area since it is the heart of Easthampton. The renderings to the right were prepared by the Cecil group, and it's just some options that were prepared a while ago. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission in Springfield in 2015, when the state initiated some complete streets initiatives to make sure that all their projects included bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, started looking at Union Street and developing ideas for Union Street and also for the rest of the city as well. It's a bigger study that they did. To focus on between Railroad Street and Liberty Street, there's some high crashes and conflict points through that area, so we're going to be looking to enhance that as we move along. As everybody knows, the pavement out there is in desperate need of rehabilitation, and just review the parking needs and create a more bicycle-friendly corridor the best we can. In 2017, the city started working with VHB, and we started working with DOT to try to get funding for the project. Through what they call the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is a pretty competitive program within in the region. We're going to be we worked through the first initial process to get eligible to be put on that list. We were put on the list pretty quickly, and because of the characteristics of the corridor, it's an urban area, an arterial roadway, an important corridor to the region. It scored very well when you start reviewing pedestrian, bicycle, and other features, so it got moved up pretty high on the list as to being considered as part of the TIP. So right now we're slated to be in the fiscal year of 2021, which starts actually in October of 2020. And so that's when this project would probably be in construction. We'll touch a little bit about that later on. So here's some photos, just some of the existing conditions, which, if you obviously work or live or visit Union Street, you've seen this quite a bit, but there's quite a lot of areas where the curb reveal is minimal or non-existent. Always, ideally to have like about a 6-inch reveal is what we like to shoot for. A lot of areas, the sidewalk from the buildings to the sidewalk are sloped, so we're going to look for ways to try to level that out and make it a little more accommodating. so you're not, walking down one and having to ramp up or kind of straddle that line where it ramps down and then gets flat. The pavement conditions are in poor condition. There's still the visibility of the crosswalk between Railroad Street and Liberty Street. We'll touch a little bit about this in a little bit, just about all the conflict points between cars, vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles. Crosswalk locations, there's a number of crosswalk locations that kind of are in areas where it's hard to see pedestrians stepping out from the curb. They're blocked by on-street parking, looking for ways to enhance those. And then there's a lot of areas where the utility poles are right up against the side of the curb line. And we're going to look for ways to try to increase the distance to about 18 inches or so. That's what the minimum is we want to have, so that there's no impacts of cars hitting them, when they're right adjacent to the curb line. It's a little hard to read because it's white, but what we ended up doing as part of this study is we had to go through and do a bunch of traffic counts. We did survey of the entire corridor. We had to do a bunch of assessments about crash data through the corridor. And in this area, from High Street all the way down through Payson Avenue, there's actually a little line attached to these little triangles. But each dot, 2 dots represent basically 2 cars interacting in a collision. And we assessed all this data. We worked with the police department and Mass DOT through the RMV and got all kinds of information. And we broke this down and we mapped it all out on the corridor. And you can see that there's quite the density of crashes right through this area where Chapman Avenue is, and from Liberty and Railroad Street. And a lot of that, the police reports that we went through are interactions of the narrow lanes, the on-street parking, not seeing pedestrians stepping out from the curb line, and that sort of thing. What's interesting is that there were 76 incidents over this 3-year period from 2014 to 16. And most of the crashes were rear end, angle, or they happened during the daytime when it was clear or when the pavement was dry. So that's a pretty clear indication that there's something going on here as a result of likely the narrow lanes, the dense corridor, visibility of people walking through crosswalks and people stopping short. But there were a few incidents that were related to weather conditions, snow and ice, but the majority of them were related to dry conditions. So there's an indication there's some issues and some things that need to get addressed as part of this project. This is the first board that when you walked in, going left to right. I'm starting at the north and working my way south. So this is the proposed improvements as it stands right now. And again, this is, it's on a survey-based plan. We brought in an aerial so everybody could see where it transposes. We still have some work to do to get to a 25% design submission and engineering this, and so over the next year this will continue to be engineered, and look forward to hearing any impact today and as we move the project along. But starting at High Street, we're looking at cleaning up the crosswalks here, maintaining the bus stop. For the majority of the corridor, as I stated before, we need to maintain and try to provide bicycle combinations and lanes. This is an urban arterial which is on the National Highway System network, so it's a pretty important corridor from a mobility standpoint for the region. And because of the utility poles and the alignment of the roadway, we're trying to hold the curb line on the east side, or on the top of the road here, and hold the parking through that stretch. Most of the widening is going to happen on the west side, I guess you would say, of the corridor. Most of the widening happens between High Street and the rail trail. When we get to the other side of the rail trail, I'll get to that in a little bit. We're trying to bring the curb line in a little bit more to make it a little less open sea of pavement, make it a little safer in that manner. But what you're seeing here is that in the northbound direction, we have a bicycle lane here. And then in the southbound direction, we have a share. Now, ideally, you would have bicycle lanes in both directions, but given the tight constraints in the corridor, we can't get bicycle lanes without really impacting all the parking or impacting buildings or businesses. And we had a preliminary meeting with Mass DOT to talk about our approach. They seemed amenable to what we are showing and what we have here. We still have to go through a design practice or process and share with them our thoughts and more detailed design, and we'll work through comments. But certainly we realize that on-street parking is valuable out here to a lot of the businesses. We're trying to maintain that. In this stretch here, you see the Rite Aid, we're able to carve out a couple spaces here and a couple spaces here just before, 3 spaces here before School Street. Some of the crosswalks are getting consolidated. They are a little close, and plus if we do crosswalks, it impacts parking. We have to take out parking, you have to have a 20-foot buffer on either side, and that could take away some parking as well. But looking to enhance the intersection here with some enhanced crosswalks, some treatments we'll talk about in a little bit. The second or the middle section works our way up from School Street. The Pride Station's right here, hardware stores here, and then basically we hit the Manhan Trail. We're looking for treatments, and again, this is just the first cut for this, but this whole area here is proposed to be, we're looking at options to make that like a raised tabletop, where it would come up probably between 3 and 5 inches, level out, be some sort of treatment over and across the rail trail. It'd either be a stamped brick, like a brick red asphalt concrete of some sort. We're looking at trying to redirect the rail trail so it's not just a straight shot across. People, I think, tend to ride and just keep going. We want to make sure they stop, look, make sure everybody's aware of what's going on. And this area here was a real high crash area. So we're going to be looking to enhance this. All new sidewalks. There is a stretch through here where the parking ends up being impacted, but this happens to be an area where there's a lot of off-street parking spaces immediately in that vicinity. When we get to this side, heading to the south towards the signal, the bike lane is now on this side of the road, and a Shero is on this side, on the east side of the road. And the thought there is that since the Manhan Trail is used pretty widely in the city and along the region, people will travel the rail trail, get off, and then head out from the trail. Since we realize we can only get we're focusing on getting at least a bike lane on one side of the roadway. Our approach is to get people off the trail and to their destination, and then they'd share the road to come back on a Shero. The next slide talks about the signalized intersection here, shows the intersection improvements, maintaining and just making some slight enhancements to the crosswalk here. The parking that runs across the parking lot here ends up going away. We maintain the parking that's down here, which is utilized. The lane configurations of the intersection are pretty similar to what's there today, although we'll be looking at doing a whole new traffic signal, new phasing and detection so that it operates a lot more efficiently. We're going to try to make this connection right here by doing a new crosswalk, which isn't there today. We're going to minimize our impacts to the walk and the landscaping in this area and try to just carve in these ramps on these parts. The sidewalk through here is deficient in width, so we might have to do a little retaining wall along this stretch, which is something we'll work through as we further our design. And so that's what's, I think as part of this we'll do a, like the black traffic signals, which you've seen throughout. They'd be black and not the galvanized type. The city back in June, or a few weeks ago actually, did a parking study for Union Street, and this table here we put together just summarizes some of the parking that's out there today. There's 65 total spaces along the corridor, on both sides of the roadway. There are about 8 or so illegal spaces, and what I mean by illegal spaces is that over the years they've been striped, but based on current design standards, you're not supposed to park within 10 feet of a hydrant, 20 feet of a crosswalk, and 5 to 10 feet within a driveway. So some of these things over the years, businesses probably ask for more parking. DPW has kind of striped them, and as things have gone along and design standards change, some of this stuff has accumulated over the years. But in order to get the federal and state funding, we need to make sure we adhere to the guidelines that are there today. The on-street parking that's available is occupied between 40 and 78% of the time, and I think the highest spaced utilization was during the morning. In the upper and lower areas, which is where we're primarily maintaining most of the parking, is where a lot of the parking activity happens. In the middle part, just south of the Manhan Rail, where there's a lot of the surface lots, people are using the off-site surface lots more so than the on-street parking. So we're seeing an opportunity to use some of that to capitalize on meeting the design standards that we need to do to widen the lanes. The lanes are out there in general are pretty narrow, and we need to, like I said, accommodate for bicycles as well. And there's just some more information in here about there were 10 areas observed along the corridor where the lowest number of available spaces was about 26 of the 65. So, you know, they think it's a high turnover area where people are coming in and leaving pretty quickly. And there seemed to be always enough parking for on off-street for the businesses. So now we're going to go into some renderings. We did 2 renderings for the corridor. This one is looking south, and the hardware store is right here on your left. The next one's going to show a rendering of what it might look like. Basically, this is showing, this is existing curb line. It's pretty much staying where it is today. New concrete sidewalks, a 7-foot parking stall, a 6-foot bicycle lane, which is standard. I like to have that more clearance, I think, between the interaction between all that. And I think this helps clean up a lot of the crashes that we've been seeing out there where people are pulling in and out of parking, or the interaction of people driving on the road. And then going southbound, this is the shared symbol with the bike path. Probably somewhere between, we're not keeping parking 3 to 5 feet of widening. If we're trying to carve in some parking in some areas on that side of the road where we might widen a little bit more in areas. But basically new concrete sidewalks here. You can see we're just working right up to the wall here near the liquor store. New pavement, 11-foot travel lanes, and that's looking southbound. So looking northbound, 7-Eleven is right here to my right. The Manhan Trail is right here, and we're looking up the corridor. And so this is that area where I talked about we wanted to enhance this area between Liberty and Railroad Street. The Manhan comes through here. We've got what they call a rapid flashing beacon, which gets activated either by motion or push button. So if somebody comes up, it starts flashing. We start our bicycle lane that comes out and comes down through here. The bicycle lane on this side would go to the north. It would be at the tabletop, so this little arrow here designates a little rise in the pavement, so you'd rise up 3 or 5 inches, as I said, onto some sort of tabletop brick pattern that would differentiate between the asphalt in this area, so it would really call attention to this whole area, and then you drive up and you'd continue through. So these are some of the features that we're going to look at as we further develop the plan set. This is a tabletop intersection. I think this was in Illinois. It's just a different pattern type, but kind of similar treatment for what we would be looking at there. New traffic signals would be a black traffic signal similar to what's seen in this photo. In some areas on the plan, you might have noticed that we'd be bumping the curb out where the on-street parking is. These are called curb extensions or neck downs. These tend to be used so the pedestrian can walk out to the curb line. The driver can see them waiting at that area before they step out into the crosswalk, whereas now you could see if a car was parked here and they were standing back here, they step out, you can't see them until they get in front of the car and then walk out. So this is to give the pedestrian a little more protection by standing on a sidewalk that's raised up with a curb. These are some other treatments that would look at the bike lanes or different types of treatments at crosswalks. These are sharrows like you've seen in the photos. These can be other treatments that can be made for bicycle lanes, whether they're colored. Sometimes they're colored throughout the whole project limit. Sometimes they're just dashed green at the unsignalized or conflict points. So there's different features there. And then this is just a rapid flashing beacon. This is down on in Springfield on the north end, in the North End Brightwood area. So this is a little kind of grainy, but not really meant to show you the details of that, but at least this is one of the pages of the schedules we have to prepare for Mass DOT, so it's a pretty detailed process and schedule that we have to kind of adhere to. But the anticipated schedule, we're going to continue to do outreach with the city. Our 25% design is hopefully early fall. We get those plans in, we receive comments, and then we get into a lot of the other design at 75% with landscaping and different more detailed features and grading and that sort of thing. Design public hearing, hopeful it's in the spring, likely because of the holidays and Christmas. It'll get pushed out a little bit to make sure there's well attended. And then final design will happen somewhere in the spring and the fall with construction in 2021. Chances are the construction will contract will be awarded in the fall or winter of 2020, but they won't break ground until the spring, so they get a full construction season. The duration is probably 2 construction seasons, likely between these years, 2021 and 2023. I would think 2021, 2022 would be ideally when this would happen. Access to businesses need to be maintained. Mass DOT is adamant about that. They make sure the contractor maintains that access. We're going to be doing full depth roadway reconstruction. One of the things that we hope with the full depth is that we can raise the roadway up, the profile or the center line of the roadway up a few inches to help offset that, that sloped crosswalk that you have out there today, to try to make it a level, consistent crosswalk throughout. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at as part of we go through design. We don't anticipate detours, but since it is such a tight corridor, we could see some one-way or alternating of one-way traffic where they might stop traffic in one direction, let people go through, but they would likely, we'd push to have two-way traffic during at least the peak periods when traffic is at its highest. And I think that's it.